I'm Ryan Cantor, and in this video, we're talking about some Clemson and South Carolina baseball prospects and their long-term future. To help us do that, we have Chris Clegg. Chris Clegg writes for Pitcher List. He specializes in dynasty baseball and the prospect pipeline. He also has a Substack, which you should Google his name in Substack and find him there. Chris, thanks for joining.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking some players. We already had some discussion on the Clemson Carolina series, and now we get to discuss some players and some prospects in that. So it's fun guys on both sides of the board that looking forward to discussing.
Yeah, and I know you could go very deep on probably everyone on the Gamecocks. I'm going to ask you to go deep on just a few Clemson guys. And let's start with Will Taylor, because I think he's the most interesting because, of course, he's on the football team as well. He was a big baseball prospect that we had signed, but we weren't sure we were going to keep him from the draft. And then, of course, he tore his ACL playing football, and he's good at football, but he's not a star, whereas he could be a star baseball player if he can get fully healthy. What are your thoughts on Will Taylor for Clemson the next 2-3 years, but also long-term his future as a professional athlete?
Yeah, Will Taylor's an interesting case, and I'm going to be honest, I'm very shocked that he ended up on Clemson's campus. There was a lot of smoke around him going 10 overall to the Angels, and pretty much he just said, I want to go to Clemson. And so they passed him up there, and he ended up getting taken in the 19th round. The Rangers were just like, hey, we'll just take a shot and see if we can sign this guy, which obviously at that point he wasn't. Like he had turned down first round money, which to me is tough. I can't imagine being in that spot and turning down that kind of money, because if you go 10th overall, like there's pretty significant value there. But Taylor, man, he's very talented. Like he was very talented prep player, was a three sport athlete, excelled at football. Obviously, he's playing at Clemson for football, playing baseball at Clemson as well. He's a high contact bat, a lot of speed, and I think they're still developing power in this profile. He's not going to get to a ton of game power probably yet, but I still think there's a chance that that does develop. And to me, like Will Taylor profiles as someone who, getting fully healthy, if he really focuses on baseball, could jump back into that conversation of being a top draft pick upon being eligible if he can get back on track and just get healthy. I think that's the biggest thing. Torn ACL, that's tough to recover from for any athlete. A lot of guys do it, but some guys struggle. And with Taylor's case, like, he may not have the most impressive year, at least early on, because, like, again, getting back in the game, getting your feet wet in competition, like, not always easy to do. So Will Taylor gets healthy by ACC play. I think he could really rise up to the occasion. I think that there's a case for him to be one of the better players on this team, and he rightfully should be, I think, one of the best players on this Clemson team with some time, with more experience, and ultimately talented enough where pushing himself back into being a serious draft pick upon eligibility.
Yeah, if you're going 10th overall in the MLB first year player draft, that's about $4 or $5 million of signing bonus. So tough to pass that up. Of course, you don't know his family and financial background and all that, but it's hard. It's hard for that to not the situation to be such that that's not tough to pass up. But hopefully, he can have 3 or 4 great years at Clemson and get a quicker path to the majors rather than kind of toiling in the minors, which I know isn't always the most fun experience for everyone. Another player I wanted to ask about is Cam Cannarella. He was listed as a shortstop by Perfect Game as a recruit out of high school, but he's playing center field. He is a freshman and he's hitting cleanup, and he's looking pretty good. Your thoughts on Cam?
He's honestly one that I wasn't really familiar with coming into this discussion. I did a little more research prior, and it's pretty impressive to step in and be the cleanup hitter as a freshman on a team like Clemson. And I think that speaks a good bit of volume about the caliber player we're looking at here. I think he's grown a little bit, added to his frame, added some weight and some power. And he actually had some impressive results as a high schooler out of Hartsville High School. He's a little bit older for being a freshman, but we're seeing that more and more. That's becoming more common where guys may stay back a year to be a little bit older for the draft, or even just being older as a freshman. Some guys reclassify and want to be younger, but yeah, it's kind of just depends on the player. Some guys want an extra year to develop, and that seems like the case here. Some guys bloom later, and it's been so far so good for Cam Cannarella. I mean, .464 average so far through 7 games. No home runs on the board, but he's had a couple extra base hits, double, triple, still slugging .571. Again, I like the swing, like the profile. Overall, to me, it looks like someone that they can continue to develop and could be a really solid player for them for the next couple years, especially when you're getting your feet wet as a freshman. We just don't see that often at schools like Clemson or South Carolina when they just step in, unless they're just absolute stars. And, for a guy that wasn't really on my radar to coming here and doing what he's done so far, pretty impressive. And I'm looking forward to getting to see him this weekend live in person. So it'll be one I'm watching closely.
Yeah, for him to come in as a freshman and hit cleanup is eye opening. Prior to the season, me and my buddy we have a text thread and we're sort of debating who would start. And I heard Eric Bakich keep talking about this freshman Cam Cannarella, and I was like, I think he's starting. He's like, no, he's a freshman. He's not going to start. But here he is hitting cleanup. So yeah, good start for him. It's interesting. He's hitting his on base percentage is .515. He has 5 steals but no home runs, and he's in that cleanup slot. Be interesting to see if there are any adjustments to this lineup prior to the Palmetto series against the Gamecocks, because of course they just got swept by UCF, although that was more of a pitching thing. So one other guy I want to ask you about, and then we could flip it over and you could tell us about any Gamecocks that are worth mention, is Caden Grice. He 2 years ago was outstanding for Clemson, but last year didn't hit for much average, and so far this year he's hitting .321, but no home runs. That's just the 1 RBI. He's been fine, but not sort of the superstar that he's sort of talked about in Clemson circles. Any thoughts on Grice?
Yeah, he's one that's quite interesting, and I think the expectations were pretty high on him coming in this year, especially with Wagner no longer on the team. Like, Wagner was your power source. I mean, slugged 27 home runs last year, pretty substantial for college. And like I said, the expectations for Grice were there, and failed a bit. I won't say failed a bit last year, but just kind of some regression, I guess, to an extent.
For sure.
And this year, I think there's the expectation of, he should step up and be our best hitter. And obviously, he's draft eligible this year, so you want to see something good out of him. You want to see him get back to those freshman numbers like we saw in 2021, where he slashed .317, .427, .618, hit 15 home runs. I mean, that's the guy that we want to see. And so far, the power hasn't been there. The biggest issue with him is the strikeouts, just a ton of strikeouts. Last year, that was the issue, just the swing and miss. This year, seems like, we're still striking out some, but there's been some improvements. Still 9 strikeouts and 33 plate appearances is far from ideal, especially when you're looking at the kind of competition that they faced so far. You definitely want to see that number trend a bit downward. I wonder if he's just putting too much pressure on himself, pressing a bit. We see that. I mean, he's supposed to be the guy. He's now in a junior year. He's draft eligible. And so we see sometimes these guys just are a little hard on themselves and try to make things happen. They're trying to hit everything out of the park. And I wonder if that's the case with Caden Grice right now. We know the talent's there. We've seen it for a freshman to do what he did. And even last year, I think still we saw some power from him last year. I think he can be fine. I think he's just got to get back on track, a couple good games, get him in his groove and get going. But this should be Clemson's guy.
Yeah, I mean, they need power from someone. They've got 6 home runs on the year. Cooper Ingles, their leadoff guy, he's more of a kind of a true hitter more than a power threat in theory. He's also catcher, kind of DHing some as he's getting 100% healthy. But Grice and Wright really need to be the power guys. Grice in that 2-hole, if he could provide power, would totally change the lineup. So definitely waiting for the breakout there if this lineup and this team is really going to meet their potential. Now, South Carolina's having no problems with power, leading the nation in home runs, as you shared. So maybe a couple guys stand out to you from the Gamecocks, whether it's hitting or pitching.
Yeah, so in the lineup, Braylen Wimmer has been pretty substantial standout so far. He was taken last year's draft in the 18th round by the Phillies and chose to come back to school. Probably a smart move. I mean, you're going that late. It's not getting a big bonus. You might as well just hedge your chances, come back and see what you can do. And he did that. And so far, the results have been pretty telling. As you see, 4 home runs, 5 stolen bases. I mean, the power speed combo is certainly there. And last year, he hit .312 on the year, but he only hit 7 home runs. So he's already pushing that total in just 7 games. Is it a fluky thing? I'm not sure, but it is certainly worth watching so far with what we've seen from Wimmer. And, you know, it could be a case where he pushes up his draft stock 10 rounds, even if he goes 8th round. I mean, that's pretty substantial. So he's one that's been pretty impressive for me. I mean, Gavin Casas has the name value just because his brother, Red Sox first baseman, rookie first baseman, Tristan Casas, big prospect coming through the system. And he's got some name value with him. He's got big power. You look at him, the stroke, everything is just screams huge power hitter here. And so far, we've seen pretty much nothing but good out of him. He's put up some impressive exit velocities. And overall, like, I think Casas could be a guy that, really improves his draft stock a bit. And he's been one that's been highly impressive to me. But obviously, the one who stands out the most and has the most pedigree on the team is Will Sanders, who's going to be their Friday night starter. And Sanders, big guy, 6'6", 230. He just has your prototypical like starter build, which teams love. Like, you're a Yankees fan. Like, this is a Yankee starter. Like, I can see them drafting Will Sanders. They've drafted starters out of South Carolina before, in Jordan Montgomery and Clark Schmidt. By the way, Clark Schmidt going to get that 5th spot, I think. Debuted a new pitch yesterday in spring training. Looked really good. So I think he can get that 5th spot.
Never put stock into spring training chatter about new pitches.
But it was true. Like, he threw the cutter more than he pitched, and it was good. It was a good pitch. Does it stick? I don't know. But he said he's been giddy about throwing that all off season. So we'll see.
We'll see how Aaron Boone squanders that. But carry on.
Will Sanders, like I said, big starter, Friday guy. He's your prototypical starter build. Teams love him. Like, MLB teams really want to see something out of him this season. And I think there's a chance he's a first rounder. Like I said, the Yankees are likely to pick in the back end of the first round with a good season. And so from that standpoint, he could be a guy that fits there. Last year, he was fine. I mean, 3.43 ERA, 91 Ks in 89 innings. So nothing like standout per se. He was good in SEC play overall. And I think this is the year that he's got to step up to the plate. I mean, he's a second team preseason All-American on Baseball America Perfect Game and D1 Baseball. So those are pretty substantial things and accolades. He's got to put the results to the table. And so far, he's been good. Again, we say he hasn't really faced great competition, but we'll see this weekend. On Friday night, we'll see what he's made of as he faces Clemson in a huge game. I think Friday night feels like a must-win for South Carolina. And so, what will Will Sanders bring to the table? He's got a big start ahead of him. And so those are 3 guys I think are probably some of the bigger names on South Carolina that we'll see, the rest of this year that could have some value. And Will Sanders obviously being the most valuable as a pitcher, but the lineup doesn't have a true stud standout that's going to be like a first round in the MLB draft, but some just solid names around the board.
Yeah. Now, is Gavin Casas, he's not as big of a prospect as Tristan was. Is that right?
No, see, Tristan was drafted out of high school. So, I mean, he came out and was just a stud pretty much out the gate. I mean, I'm local in Greenville, South Carolina. Like, he was here in Greenville with the Drive. So I got to see a bit of him before. And Gavin Casas was actually a transfer in this year to South Carolina.
From Vanderbilt.
He was, yes, Vanderbilt. That's right.
Yeah.
So pretty talented team, obviously, but he wasn't getting the reps there. So he came to South Carolina, and so far so good. So we'll see what he continues to bring to the table. But yeah, he's been the best power hitter so far.
Gotcha. Well, Chris, thank you so much for shedding some of your insight. Folks, be sure to follow him on Twitter. You can see his handle, Clegg, there, and search his name with Substack, and you can find his fantasy baseball and baseball prospect information there. As always, please subscribe to this channel so we can eventually monetize it, and be sure to like and comment to help this video in the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for listening.